It was the middle of the night when I heard it. I'd been finalizing a project on Pro Tools when an email came in from my friend Greg. The subject line was, "Let me know what you think." There was nothing in the body of the email, but there was an attachment, a .wav audio file, less than a megabyte in size and displayed a 30-second runtime. I sent back an email asking what it was. He responded quickly, saying that's what he needed me to find out. I'm not surprised Greg emailed me about it. I'm a sound engineer and do post-work for documentaries and some low-level TV shows. I mix, design, clean up dialogue, I do Foley and score. I'm good at everything, but not great at any of them. But I also know Tor networking and frequented the deep web using multiple VPNs in a customized sound room/Faraday cage I'd built myself. In the second email, Greg told me he'd been sent the file from a Reddit link which was now gone. The subs were taken down and the spark around it quickly went out. But the file came back online and started moving through Telegram and Discord. More and more people listened to it, debating and theorizing what it was. One person managed to track the file back to the dark web, but from there it was impossible to trace to an origin. All it had was a name. Inferno.wave. I ran the attachment through 2 full scans of antivirus software I'd modified myself. Came up clean on both, so I downloaded it and opened a visualizer of the sound waves. They were all peaking consistently. I lowered the volume so I wouldn't blow my eardrums and pressed play. The sounds started immediately, an assault on every sensor in my ear. High, low, and medium pitches. It was producing multiple Shepard's tones, including in reverse, giving a dizzying, constant swelling and decaying effect. The inside of my head felt like it was boiling, like a fever. I was unable to fully latch onto anything after the first few seconds. It was too all-consuming, like a bad mushroom trip in a room with no lights on. The darkness just guides you, and if you resist, it gets worse. It felt like it was playing for minutes, hours even. Then it finally ended. I threw my headphones off. I was overwhelmed with emotions and burst into tears. I couldn't explain why. I didn't remember a single thing I heard, like it was all immediately erased from my memory. But I felt like I was changed forever. When I calmed down, I went out back for a smoke and brought a bottle of bourbon to chase it. I felt dizzy and couldn't stand up straight. I leaned against the house and realized the sound had affected my entire ear. It wasn't just my hearing. It was also my equilibrium that was torched. My sense of balance was gone and vertigo was taking over. I had a second smoke and felt my senses and balance coming back. I could hear the rustling in the forest behind my house. Dogs barking somewhere on the property next to mine. The cigarette amber burning. My own heavy breathing. I went back inside and quickly felt like a foreigner in my own home. And as I entered my office, I felt like I wasn't the only one in there. I hit the power bar beside the door and my entire system shut off. When it did and the room was plunged into darkness, I saw the silhouette of something appear against the window, on the inside of the glass, in the room. I scrambled to turn the overhead light on, but the silhouette was gone. I didn't get a good look at it, but it looked like it had 2 spikes protruding from its forehead. I got my shotgun and slept with my bedroom door locked that night. But neither of those could protect me from what was going on in my head. The nightmares came before I was even asleep. They were horrifying and acted as all dreams do, starting without a point of origin, but continuously moving in a forward momentum. They all ended with me in a terrifying version of hell. I was drowning in lakes of boiling water as fire streaked down at me like sheets of rain. There was an unbearable heat from every direction. I crawled out of the lake onto a moving but solid layer of molten lava. My skin melted and healed at the same time. My eyes burned and mended simultaneously. The pain was excruciating and never ending, and felt like a burn had scarred the entire inside of my body forever. I woke up in bed, covered in sweat and fevering. It was still early, just before dawn, but I wasn't going back to sleep, even though I was exhausted. I took a cold shower and watched steam come off my body as the cool water reacted with my hot skin. I checked my phone and saw 3 missed calls and a voicemail from Greg. It was urgent and panicking. Greg was seeing things he shouldn't see outside of sleep, but they were in his house, his room, following him, chasing him, attacking him. They were flashes of beings from some kind of hellish world. Greg was touched by something he described as a demon made of dark red mist. The touch burned Greg's arm badly. When he woke up, his arm was still burned and horribly infected. He could barely move it, and it seemed to be moving its way up to his shoulder. Greg warned me not to let them touch me. Them. Greg was convinced it was because of the audio recording. He begged me, pleaded with me to listen to the file again, to try to decipher it, figure out where it came from, search for a remedy. The message cut off halfway through one of his cries. I tried to call him back, but there was no answer. I left a message and told him to call me. I texted him the same thing. After that, I didn't know what to do. Everything felt off. I decided to make some coffee and try to divert myself from what was going on. I needed some crisp ambiance from the deep woods out back for a new project I was working on. It would be simple and distracting enough. I rolled a joint to ease my nerves and to smoke on the walk. I grabbed my mic, mixer, and headphones and went out back. I have a good chunk of property in my backyard. There are some old trucks and cars, leftovers from distant relatives of the past. The realty is mostly woods and swampland, but has a few paths and trails that cut through it for four-wheeling and snowmobiling. There was a clearing just off the trails I wanted to get a recording of. The wind came in through the trees in a strange way some mornings, and I'd been trying to capture it right for a few months. I made it there and was recording for about 5 minutes before everything silenced out. I snapped my fingers near the mic and heard it clearly, but the wind disappeared. No leaves rustling, animals in movement or birds chirping. It was like I was in an anechoic chamber. No direct or reflective sounds, just pure isolation. I turned up all the volume levels on my mixer, but the woods had gone still. Then, a snap. Somewhere off in the forest, a twig broke, and another, but this time in the other direction. Then 2, 3, 4 right after each other. Something was walking, shambling forward. I did full 360-degree turns, but there was nothing and no one out there aside from the trees. The cracks and snaps got louder, closer, like there were dozens of feet or claws scrambling along the ground towards me. I crouched in fear, covering my head and face and shutting my eyes as a heavy wave of wind and heat knocked against me. I kept my feet and held still, bracing for more. I waited for the sounds, or breeze, or heat, or anything more to come at me, but they didn't come. I stood back up, opening my eyes to see the forest was dark. It had just been this morning, but somehow it was now night. The day had disappeared. I started making my way back to the path to my house, feeling more and more surrounded by unseen predators. A twig snapped somewhere behind me and I spun to check. Deep in the woods, something was glowing, moving slowly a meter off the ground. It flickered a deep red and looked like a marshmallow on fire, floating through the woods. It was coming towards me. I froze up. A deep pit in my stomach formed and I was brought back to childhood, to the one time my parents took us camping. As a kid, I burnt my sister's face with a marshmallow I'd let catch fire. It wasn't intentional, obviously, just goofing around, and it turned into a bad accident. But it left a nasty scar on her cheek that I still don't think she'll ever forgive me for. The little ball of fire traveling forward through the trees looked exactly like that flaming marshmallow. I picked up my pace, finding the path and making my way back to my house. I checked over my shoulder and saw the ball of fire was still following me. My run turned to a sprint. I didn't look over my shoulder or slow down until I was through my back door and it was slammed shut. As I caught my breath inside, I saw the ball of fire float past the window and out of sight. I checked my phone and saw more missed calls from Greg, and voicemails. I listened to the first one but had to turn it off. The whole recording was Greg crying in pain and fear, begging for help. I went back upstairs to my office. Whatever we'd listened to had affected Greg in deep, physiological and hallucinatory ways. And it was starting to do the same to me. I turned the power bar back on and lit up my system and monitors. I sat down and drank more bourbon, though I didn't think anything could take this edge off. I put my headphones on and pressed play on the file. I was immediately thrown back to a familiar and horrified state. The sounds refound their groove in my ears again, and my muscles tensed, then shut down. This time, I was remembering everything. Over the years, my ears had become so attuned to nuance, I was able to decipher everything I was hearing from the file. Pain and suffering. There were horrific, torturous cries coming from fire lashing and water boiling and bubbling. I could hear storms of violent, nuclear thunderclaps that shot through my head like electroconvulsive therapy. Fiery rain that hit the lava-hardened ground like tiny meteors, flames whipping against bare skin. Pain and suffering. There was something like a huge, powerful generator fueling it all that sounded like it was all very nearly about to explode. A leviathan of bass and sub-bass vibrations, shaking so strongly they were creating some kind of war drum effect. And underneath, there was a rhythm, some strange harmony under the chaos, like chanting or a prayer. Then it ended, and the world was thrown into silence and stillness. The room felt darker, and my body felt like a lead statue about to topple. I sat quietly for several minutes before I felt the world shift back on balance, and my mind wandered right back to where it was. I thought about the sounds, the screams in particular. I'd heard all kinds before. In one documentary I worked on, which followed the genocide of the Tutsis in Rwanda, I heard my first real death screams. There'd been new audio recordings out of some of the towns that had been slaughtered by armed militia. They were horrific. It wasn't just that you knew the screams were real. The sounds hit differently entirely. They landed somewhere deep and dark in your heart. I felt like I was suffering with the screamers. I heard once you could tell fake screams from real ones because the souls were trapped in the sounds of the real one, and they reached out and held you with an icy grip when you listened. This was something like that, but worse. I felt like I was suffering with the screamers. My whole body had heated and my muscles were tensing from pressures on different parts of me, like the air in the room was flexing. I stared at the file, sitting there on my desktop between my projects and my music. Inferno.wave. My phone buzzed. I checked the screen, hoping for Greg. But it was his sister, Carly. She was crying. The family wasn't sure how it happened or why, but Greg was dead. Somehow, Greg had caught fire in his room. He ran outside and jumped into the family pool. But he kept burning. It was like the water wasn't touching him. Greg climbed out of the pool, giving up, and died in the backyard. His body was burned to a crisp. The immediate thought was suicide, but there was no sign of fuel or accelerant used. In fact, they couldn't tell how such a blazing hot fire could have erupted from his body without leaving a trail out of the house or burning a blade of grass in the field he'd collapsed in. Carly asked if I'd talked to him recently, if I'd noticed anything strange about him, if he'd mentioned any suicidal thoughts. I was in shock, but managed to offer my love and prayers, while claiming he seemed fine to me, which was true. Outside of the last day or so, he was his normal, goofy self. The only thing that had changed was the audio file he'd listened to. I told her I'd stop by the house later to see them, and thanked her for calling to tell me. When I hung up, it all became real. I had to figure out what that file was and where it came from. I started up a program I'd created that used different audio translation filters to help with identifying languages in some of the projects I worked on. The programs measured for both pronunciation, sound, and grammatical shape and origin, discerning the language genesis. I was getting back some strange results. At first, it wasn't identifying anything at all. I had to restart the program twice. Then it began partially recognizing elements of words in Greek, Aramaic, Demotic, Hieratic, and Coptic. I separated the dialects, whatever they were, from everything else. The words came out in a strange, lengthy grouping. They sounded like a prayer, but worked in perfect loop, ending on the same notes as they began, which was similar to the shepherd's tone. I put the phrases through a search engine. I only received one result, which led to some back-channel website that explored ancient, dead languages. The result gave me chills, claiming similarities to and including the divine language. I sent an email to the site moderator, who is a professor in philology and linguistics, with the prayer translated into a readable series of words, asking for his immediate help. As I waited for a response, I checked the Telegram chat rooms Greg mentioned. They gave me more chills. Everyone posting had been complaining about the same things as Greg experienced. Some of them were more personal. The more frightening stories described watching their friend or family member or coworker go up in flames 2 days after listening to the audio file. They'd begin by coughing up smoke, then their skin turned dark like it was burning. Their insides would begin to melt, then they'd spontaneously combust, wherever they were. I closed the chat rooms and decided to go out for a smoke. I wasn't going through the woods though, not after last time. I sat on the back edge of the yard and looked out into the woods. I looked at the few old cars in the back, rusting over. I thought about how I used to play in them. I smoked my first cigarette in one of them. First beer. First girl I made out with. They held a lot of memories. Sitting there trying to break down what was happening, all I could come up with was some sound frequency project or experiment or weapon leaked out or was unleashed and was spreading through various social media channels. I'd read about shady government programs focusing on sound waves and how they alter brain waves to suit various needs. Some needs were more malevolent than others, though this idea didn't seem far-fetched. But then there were the hallucinations and the extreme heat I kept feeling like a fever blanket pulsing over me in waves. All of this was deeper than some Mancurian candidate trick. I knew there was one more possibility, however insane it seemed to even think. That the file was, somehow, some way, an audio recording of hell. The idea that there was a hell, let alone that someone had been there and recorded the sounds it emitted and put it online, was insane to me. But here I was. The ambiance around me drained out and the burning of my cigarette was amplified. I focused on it, watching it burn. All of a sudden, there was smoke all around me. I tried to get up, but was no longer on the back steps. I was in the driver's seat of the rusted Jeep out back. I was seatbelted in. Smoke was funneling through the old truck from the back seats as a deep red was glowing out from it. Something was in the back, a dark silhouette amongst the smoke. I struggled against the seatbelt, but it burned into my hands like it was made of fire. The sounds, the horrifying screams from the depths of whatever hell was on that file, screeched out from the back seat. Then Greg's voice came from them.
"I'm waiting for you, Johnny. I'm keeping your seat warm."
I yanked myself forward and shot up in bed. The Jeep and the backyard were gone. I was in my room now, half under the covers, drenched in sweat. I'd been sleeping. Another nightmare had shook me. I got up. The loss of balance was back, like the world had shifted slightly and I hadn't adjusted. I could see into the hallway, which was pulsing with a deep red glow before plunging into darkness. That same levitating red ball of fire, the size of a marshmallow, floating past my doorway, moving towards the stairs down. I walked out into the hallway, the red pulse continuing to glow on and off. The fist-sized, flaming ball was at the end of the hall. It moved down the stairs, disappearing onto the first floor. I followed the ball down, putting my hand on the walls to balance myself, but found the walls and the railing were perspiring. Everything was beating with sweat. The air on the first floor was thick with humidity as I walked through it. It felt like gravity was now pushing and pulling horizontally to the sides instead of vertically down. In the main entrance, I could see into the kitchen, which opened up to dual sliding back doors made of glass. They looked out onto the deck, which had a 10-foot drop down to the ground below. A figure was standing on the deck, looking down into the backyard. The figure turned back and smiled. It was me. Then it stepped over the edge of the terrace and fell. I nervously walked through the kitchen and out onto the deck. I peeked over the edge. Heat burned the skin of my face. My eyebrows curled. My mouth went dry. The pits of hell stared up at me, daring me to look away. Pain, screaming, and suffering wailed from tiny bodies that looked like ants far below. But they were all people. Millions of them. A hand pressed into my back and I felt myself go over the edge of the deck. I turned back to see who pushed me and saw myself there, smiling. I kept hoping this was a dream, that I'd wake up during the fall into hell. But I didn't. I kept falling and the heat got hotter. I hit the ground like a brick. I felt the hardened molten lava burn through my skin and pulverize the bones in my body as I landed. I couldn't move. I was a mushy liquid that was slowly reforming into a solid figure. I could see blurry shapes rushing towards me, horrific sounds screeching from them. Then I woke up. Or rather, I came to and fell forward out of my chair. I was still sitting in the backyard, having my cigarette. I hadn't gone to the Jeep, or woken up in bed, or fallen into hell. I was still there, and the cigarette I'd started was just burning into the filter. I was covered in sweat. My clothes were stuck to me, and I felt like I was on fire. I rushed inside and got in the shower, running freezing water over me until my temperature started to drop. Then I started to cough up smoke. I had no idea how much time had passed since I listened to the track and realized it could have been 2 days already. I rushed back to my office and found an email response from the professor who moderated the website. Unfortunately, he said he couldn't help a ton as it was mostly unknown knowledge, but he'd tell me what he knew and started with what the phrase structure was. It was a prayer referred to as a deified chant. That is, a prayer structured like a palindrome, so it could be chanted backwards as well as forwards and elicit the same message. It was used to honor or worship a deity with supreme regard. The use of a palindrome itself could be interpreted in different ways, but the main explanation for it, the spiritual one, was that a palindrome was a message from angels who were watching over you. Therefore, a palindrome could be used to call angels forth for protection. But this deified chant had one portion in the middle that wasn't part of the palindrome, and it didn't appear to be for protection. The word Hallel was detected among the chants. The word translated to hell in Hebrew. Hallel didn't work the same way backwards as forwards, which made the deified chant into something else. I began coughing up huge puffs of dark smoke and my insides felt like they were burning up. I managed to focus back on my monitor and read the final part of the email. The professor offered a simple suggestion: to play the audio recording backwards. Everything except the one word, Hallel, would play the same, but maybe that word would change the effects. It seemed too obvious. So obvious, in fact, it might actually work. I dragged and dropped the file onto a timeline just to check. I reversed its flow and placed my headphones on nervously and hit play. The sound started in reverse, and I began to seizure immediately. My sight went blurry as hallucinations filled my vision, then went black. I felt like I was floating in space, no air to breathe or surfaces to touch. I didn't feel like I was a person. I felt like a spirit, an essence, floating through infinity. Then a hole opened up and a bright white light poured into the darkness. From the light, I saw bodies toppling over, falling into the darkness below them. The bodies were human-like, but some of them had wings which were burning away as they fell. The bodies dropped from the sky like a blazing red meteor shower. As they hurled downward, their brightness lit up the ground below them. I saw barren, scorched rock and desert, volcanoes erupting and mountains shaking. The bodies fell into large, slithering rivers of boiling water and fire. They screamed upwards, towards the sky. The landscape was like a moving canvas, a biblical oil painting showing the fall from heaven. The fall of the damned. The disgraced angels tumbling down through ash and cinder clouds. From the hole in the sky they'd all been thrown from, I saw a vision of the great angels Michael and Abdiel. They were casting out the final disgraced usurper from their midst. Lucifer, at once the brightest light in heaven, was now the great fallen angel, and he was being reborn as the devil to rebuild his army in this new fallen kingdom. The light from above closed, and the evils and atrocities of the fallen could only be seen by the red glow of the exploding volcanoes. A horrible explosion of sound shook through the hellscape, and I felt my essence implode from its power. Then I was back sitting in front of my monitor. I'd hit myself, and a pool of sweat had covered the floor around me. My eyes were bloodshot, and the tiny hairs in my nose had been singed away. All I could smell was them burning. Hours had passed, but I was alive. I took another shower, cleaning myself and cooling down the slight fever I had still. I started to feel better. I wasn't sure if I was in the clear, and was nervous to delete the file. So I put it into a password-protected folder on an external hard drive and locked it in a small Faraday cage I'd built. I went back online and searched Telegram and Discord. The chat rooms had gone quiet. The conversations were there, even if the people who had them weren't. And the file had vanished. It wasn't circulating anywhere anymore. Inferno.wave was gone. All that was left were the ashes of people's lives and bodies that had been torched from listening to it. I performed a lengthy online reverse search for any sign of the file, but nothing came up. It completely disappeared online and hasn't reappeared. Since then, I've been trying to get my shit together. Friendships, relationships, work, health, exercise, all of it. Because the biggest lesson I took away from this whole existential nightmare was that hell is a real place, and I never want to go there. Everything was clean. The AC was set to a comfortable temperature. I had finger foods out, still music playing, and a candle going. I was still new, and this was one of my first solo events, but I felt like I was ready. The house was cute. It was 1 story, 3 beds, 2 baths. A perfect starter home. It needed some updating, but it was nothing too crazy that the average DIYer couldn't handle. I was surprised at the time that the family had wanted to sell at all. They had only lived here for a short time. They had tried to distance themselves from the process as much as possible. They'd even refused to set foot in the home since they left. I was feeling good and had an hour to spare before the open house started and people started streaming in. To pass the time and calm my nerves, I decided to wander through the house as another last-minute refresher for any questions I'd get on the house itself. I walked around the kitchen, living room, stairs. Wait. I stopped so abruptly that I nearly tripped myself. This house was 1 story. There was no 2nd floor visible from the outside, and I was fairly certain that these stairs were not here when I got here. I was sure of it. The staircase looked like it fit with the house, and since staircases don't appear out of nowhere, I thought maybe I was so nervous that I was just losing my damn mind. I decided to check my paperwork. It did say this was a 1 story. Maybe it was just an attic or crawl space and I'd missed it before. There was a small landing with just a door at the top. I figured it'd be good to check it out just in case I got questions about it. As I stepped through the door, it was like stepping back in time. I also felt pressure in my ears as if I were on an airplane making a landing. The upstairs had a musty smell to it. There was a small extra kitchen, another living room, a bathroom, a bedroom, and a locked room with a glass door, but a full-length curtain on the inside of the door obscured the interior from my view. I stopped to take it in, and the curtain seemed to flutter slightly, as if there was a slight breeze or something moving behind it. The bedroom had wallpaper consisting of ornate patterns and velvet flowers. I had never seen anything like it. This place looked like it hadn't been touched in decades, but there was no dust or other signs of age-related wear. A sudden sound from around the corner made me jump. I followed the source. A radio had suddenly started playing in the living room. It made a sound as if it were between stations. There was a soft lime green sofa and a TV that looked older than I was. Yeah, this place was definitely straight out of the 70s. The thing is, this house itself was built in the 90s. There was another odd curtained room off the living room, too. It looked identical to the first, but this door was open, just a crack. I couldn't describe why, but it made me nervous. I suddenly noticed that despite it only being 6 p.m. in July, it was pitch black outside the windows up here. Something about this floor, besides it appearing out of nowhere, gave me a really weird feeling, despite the cheery colors. It felt like a thin veneer painted over something much, much darker. I decided I'd spent enough time up here and found myself thinking,
I hope the upstairs disappears again by the time guests arrive.
which was a sentence I'd never imagined I'd find myself uttering. I rounded the corner back into the tiny kitchen, but it was different. Cabinets were open that had been closed. But worse, the door to the stairs was just gone. This top floor couldn't have been more than 1,000 square feet. There was no way I had just got lost. I decided to retrace my steps. Maybe I hadn't come in through the kitchen after all. I went back down the hall to the bedroom and bathroom. The curtained room was gone. I felt a raw,
I know this doesn't make sense, but I don't know what to do about it.
sort of panic. I leaned into the bedroom with the fuzzy wallpaper and noticed the curtained room was in the bedroom now, but the door was open more. I could hear some faint sound coming from behind it, and I knew that I didn't want to stick around for when that door opened up all the way. I walked quickly back and stuck my head into the living room. The curtained room was gone, and the door to the stairs I had taken up here had yet to reappear. A new door had appeared though, at the back of the kitchen. I debated and decided to open it. To my immense relief, there were stairs, but the more I looked, the more I realized it wasn't right. It was dark at the bottom, so dark that part of the stairs blended into and then disappeared into a blackness as velvety as the old wallpaper. These stairs also looked old, much, much older than the rest of the house appeared to be. Before I realized what I was doing, I had already walked down several steps. I had an inexplicable urge to continue downward. Something was down there that I needed. It was old, ancient maybe. It needed me, too. I was here, and it had waited so long. It felt good to be needed. It felt right, descending into the darkness. Its elation was infectious. It vibrated through the air. No, elation isn't the right word. It was the yearning of something hollow, dangerous, looking to be full. It was needful. I was terrified. I knew something horrible was down there, and I kept continuing towards it against my will. In my mind, fear and self-preservation were fighting a losing battle against whatever it was down there that had its hooks in me, pulling me towards it. The air was electric with its excitement. My foot began to disappear into that horrid, beautiful, foreboding darkness. In the distance, a door opened and closed, shattering the silence. Someone was calling out. I blinked. It was a light in the darkness. The open house. In that moment, the connection between the thing in the darkness and myself was broken. I took advantage of the distraction and ran back up the stairs and slammed the door behind me. Someone was downstairs, looking for me. I ran through the kitchenette and the door to the stairs were back. The real stairs. I could have cried in relief, but didn't dare blink or let anything obscure my vision lest it disappeared again. The curtain door had also moved again so that it was right next to the door to the stairs. The door opened towards the back hall so that I could look inside from where I was standing. It was halfway open this time. My instincts told me,
Do not look in there. Don't look.
I reached for the handle of the door to downstairs. A soft crying was coming from the curtained room. It was alien, unlike anything I had heard before. It was not a mournful sound.
Don't look.
My hand tightened on the handle, and I heard the cry become louder, closer to the entrance of the partially opened door. It was coming. I opened, spun around, and closed the door and darted down the stairs. I looked over my shoulder, but nothing had followed me. Someone had shown up early, and I must have made a terrible first impression as I came flying down the stairs, sweaty, eyes wide with terror. I tried to get myself together and think of some way to explain my terrible state. Before I could even figure out what to say, he gestured towards my ears.
Ma'am, are you okay?
I gingerly touched first one and then the other, and sure enough, a small trickle of blood was leaking from each one. I hadn't even noticed it, but it had been dripping down, staining the collar of my blazer. I managed to collect myself a bit before the rest of the potential buyers came filing in and let my hair down to hide the bloodstains. The rest of the night was a blur, honestly. I was on edge, ready to leave and lock myself in my apartment and sleep with all the lights on. I was never going into a dark room again. I could barely focus. I hoped, more than I'd ever hoped for anything before, that no one would go up the stairs or make me go up there again. The stairs were there, but not a single guest approached them, asked me about them, or even looked at them. They walked around them like there was an invisible obstacle there. For a while, as I nodded and answered questions robotically, I wondered if I had imagined the whole thing. Was I losing my grip on reality? The only thing that confirmed to me that I hadn't had some sort of waking nightmare was when the first guest stopped me on his way out. He told me to take care, that it was going to be okay, and I almost hugged him. I think he saved my life by giving me some sort of anchor to reality. He took one last look at me, and then very clearly stared up at the door at the top of the stairs for quite a while. That was one of the weirdest and scariest things I've experienced, but that's not even the worst part. When I got back home, I noticed something in the hallway of my apartment. A door that had never been there before, made of glass with a curtain obscuring the view from the inside. It was only open a crack, but it was enough for me to hear that sound, like a failed attempt at mimicking a crying child, echoing down the empty hall. I really don't know where else I can try to explain this. I feel like I'm going crazy, or maybe I'm losing my mind or memory.
No, dementia doesn't run in my family.
Because what other explanation is there? I,
32 female.
have been having multiple instances where people tell me they've talked to me, and I can't remember that ever happening. At first, my husband,
35 male.
and I thought I was just forgetting little things, because it started with one of the other moms in the neighborhood asking me why I didn't bring any cups and napkins for the monthly get-together our neighbors have. I told her I didn't know I was supposed to bring cups, just that my husband was told to bring sodas, and we did. She said that we had seen each other at the grocery store, and she mentioned it to me, but I honestly didn't remember that conversation at all. My husband and I sheepishly apologized, and we figured I just didn't listen well enough, and it was my own fault. Not a big deal. People forget things. Then, at work, I'm a teacher at our town's only middle school. One of my students asked me why there weren't any pizzas when the class arrived for 4th period. I thought he was just being silly, so I said, "Because lunch isn't until 6th period." But the whole class was starting to get antsy, and I just continued with the lesson. I finally asked why no one was paying attention, and another student of mine said they were waiting for the pizza. I asked what pizza, because this was the first I was hearing about it. The class told me that on Monday, I had promised a pizza party for them on Friday if they all turned in their notebooks, which they did. Now this is what really confused me, because that Monday, I had missed 4th and 5th period due to a mess in the teacher's lounge. Coffee was spilled, and I had to quickly rush home to clean up and change, which my principal allowed. And my boss told me he'd have to send a substitute to cover for me, for the moment. I was never in my classroom that 4th period, so how did all of my students remember that I promised a party? I told the kids the sub might have said it and not me, and I wasn't aware. This really upset them all, but what else could I do? I never said that, but all the students swore I was in the class that day, and I had, in fact, promised. More situations like this kept happening, but I really didn't take it too seriously until it started getting weirder and more personal. It didn't stop at conversations I was never a part of either. One night, my husband was grumbling about cold water in the shower and hair in the drain, so I asked him why he showered in cold water. This really seemed to annoy him.
Like it was a choice. You spent like an hour in the shower and you didn't pull your hair from the drain when you got out.
He snapped at me.
What are you talking about? I haven't showered yet.
I said, because I really hadn't. I was going to shower in the morning.
Well, the hair in the drain was yours, and I heard the water running for an hour when I passed by the restroom. I know it wasn't Charlie.
Of course it wasn't Charlie. I was downstairs with him this whole afternoon. Charlie, 5 male, is our only son. He didn't really say anything else, but I could tell he wasn't satisfied with my answer. In hindsight, this should have been a much bigger red flag to me about this whole situation, but I chalked it up to my husband just being a little distracted. Another time, I woke up on a Saturday and went to the kitchen to make my morning coffee, but there was already a pot that had been made. My husband doesn't drink coffee, and obviously my 5-year-old didn't make it. Maybe I had made it last night and forgot to throw out the leftovers, right? The coffee was still hot. It made me feel very concerned, but I stamped down any alarms going off in my head and made my toast. Now, I make toast in a specific way, where I make 3 pieces with butter, and 1 smear of peanut butter, 1 of strawberry jam, and 1 of Nutella, all on the side of the plate so I can dip my toast. I know, it's not practical, but I like it this way, and my husband has always found it a bit strange. Whenever I've asked him to make me toast, he puts the condiments on the bread, which doesn't bother me. Well, I took my toast upstairs to my room so I could watch the morning news in my bedroom, and there was already a plate of half-eaten toast on my nightstand. I felt sick seeing it. I knew for a fact my husband didn't make it, nor did he make the coffee, because he was still sleeping. I had to be losing my memory, and it terrified me. I started writing down my daily activities so I could keep better track of what was going on, and aside from a few people in my life claiming to have conversations with me I wasn't able to remember, things started to get a little better. Until 2 weeks ago. My husband got home from work, and I was on the couch watching TV.
You guys back already?
Back from what? I asked. When I had gotten home, I fed Charlie and played with him for a bit until he fell asleep. I left his room, went to the restroom, and went to the living room to watch TV.
The park. You told me last night you were taking Charlie.
I sighed, frustrated that my memory kept slipping. I must have promised to take Charlie and forgot. No, we didn't go to the park. He's sleeping right now. My husband went to check on Charlie, but he immediately came back.
Where's he sleeping?
His room.
No, Charlie isn't there.
My blood turned cold. I never heard him get up, and I knew for a fact I had put him to sleep in there an hour ago. We both started screaming his name and searching the entire house for him, but we couldn't find him. I started crying as I looked for him because we had never had a situation where we had lost our son. My husband, in a panicked voice, said that maybe Charlie had gone to the park without me. The park was right next to our neighborhood, only a 10-minute walk, so it wasn't impossible. We took off running toward the park, and I cried harder when I saw Charlie waiting for his turn on the slide. My husband grabbed him and started inspecting him for any harm, and asking him why he left the house by himself.
I didn't. Mommy brought me. There Mommy is,
he said innocently, waving at me with a small smile. I shook my head.
No, baby. I put you down for a nap. You came by yourself. No, I was gonna sleep, but you came back from going pee and we walked.
Charlie explained this like it was obvious, like I should have known. A neighbor of mine must have overheard and joined in the conversation with,
Yeah, I saw you guys walking over and I decided to bring my girls over too. We were chatting on the bench a little while ago.
What?
I breathed, my mind racing. I hadn't been to the park all day, and yet my own son was claiming we walked over together? This was really the first time that I thought there was someone else pretending to be me. Someone acting in my place in town and at my job came to my mind. And if that wasn't scary enough, that means whoever it was is in my house. With my son. She had taken my son. Either I was actually losing my mind, or someone else was living as me. Later that night, I told my husband my thoughts after we had calmed down over the park incident, and he didn't know what to think. In a quiet voice, he mentioned that some of his coworkers had said they had thought they had seen me at a bar close to where they worked. It was the bar where their company would go after work to unwind. He said they saw me drinking and having a good time, even getting a little flirty with some of the patrons there. He told me he knew it wasn't me. I had a drinking problem in my 20s. I've been sober for 9 years, and he figured it was just someone with a similar face. I cried again. I couldn't help it. This wasn't normal. It wasn't like people around town were seeing someone who looked very similar to me. This was someone else pretending to be me.
What do you want?
I remember gasping out between my sobs. My husband just held me, but I don't think he could understand what it felt like. The next day, he installed cameras in and out of the house, and I was obsessed the second I had access to footage. I stayed in my room for 3 days, missing work, just to stare down the grainy footage for a glimpse of the other person. I didn't see much except for my husband and son continuing life as normally, so on day 4, I finally showered and got ready for work. I kissed my husband goodbye and went to work. Since I had been gone without even calling in,
My bad.
I had a lot of work to catch up on once the students went home, so I didn't finish until about 6:30 p.m. Usually I get home around 4 p.m. When I did get home, Charlie was watching TV and having a snack.
Hey buddy, where's Daddy?
I asked as I set my stuff down.
Upstairs.
He said absent-mindedly, his eyes still glued to the TV. I locked the door and went up to our room, wondering why my husband left Charlie all alone. It was fine, but still, he's only 5, and I didn't like him leaving him all by himself for too long. When I opened the door, my husband was naked on the bed, his eyes closed and a blissful smile on his face. I quickly closed the door behind me and walked up to him.
What's with the birthday suit, stud?
I joked, lightly poking him on his stomach. His skin felt flushed. Sleepily, he opened his eyes to smile at me.
Don't act coy, babe. Why'd you get all dressed? Be going somewhere?
I blinked.
Huh? I didn't just get dressed, I just got home.
At this, my husband sat up a bit straighter, his eyes flittering from me to the closed restroom door.
No, you're joking, right? Babe, you've been here since 4.
The pit in my stomach was growing, and growing fast. I shook my head slowly, my breathing becoming a bit more jagged. I started feeling lightheaded. My husband was getting pale.
Babe, I got home and you were here. We put Charlie to watch some cartoons and we started fooling around. You said you were sorry for being so paranoid lately.
He sounded like he was begging me to confirm with his words, but I couldn't. We both looked to the restroom door. After sex, I always went to freshen up first in our restroom. She was in there. I stumbled back, my hand reaching out for my husband, and he held it. The tight feeling in my chest started to burn. My whole body felt overstimulated and I couldn't breathe.
How long ago did she go in there?
I whispered.
15 minutes.
Finally, on shaky feet, my husband stood up and urged me to hand him the bat under our bed. He inched towards the door, his shaky breathing the only sound in the room. I could barely hear it over my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. He swung the door open and I screamed. It was empty. I panted heavily, my blood feeling like acid inside of me. Everything hurt when we looked around inside. There was some water on the counter, like she had been washing her face. The hand towel was damp, and my lotion bottle was open. I felt cold air on my back and I turned to see our restroom window open. It was a small one, usually only opened when one of us needed to let some of the air out when we went number 2. She would have to shimmy her way out, and if she was my exact double, it would have been a tight squeeze. Sure enough, when my husband got closer to close the window and lock it, he said the paneling felt loose, like she had busted it in her escape. I held my husband while he cried, and I couldn't imagine how violated he felt. This was so much to take in. We checked the cameras that night, Charlie sleeping between us on our bed. Didn't feel safe without him in our sight. The footage was horrible. I saw myself come through the door, but it obviously wasn't me. She put her hands on my son, and I had to clap a hand over my mouth to keep myself quiet, to avoid waking Charlie. She held him in the living room, on her hip, and kissed his sweet little face. Even writing this now, my hands are shaking thinking about this imposter in my house with my baby. We quickly fast-forwarded through the footage of her in bed with my husband. He cried a little more watching it, and I felt sick.
She was just like you. She felt just like you. I couldn't tell a difference,
he whispered in a broken voice. There was no camera in the bathroom. I wish I could say that there was something I saw in the footage that showed me this woman was clearly an imposter, but the fact is, there wasn't. She moved with my exact same mannerisms, she comforted my son exactly how I did, and she looked exactly like me. Clearly, down to my exact body and voice, since my husband couldn't tell a difference. She had to have been watching me for a long time to be able to mimic me to a T. This week, I haven't left the house. My husband goes to work and he tells me how unsafe he feels. He can't leave the house without looking over his shoulder. We tried filing a police report, but with no evidence, they didn't do much. They took the footage and our statements, but we haven't heard back. I wouldn't be surprised if they think it's a joke, since the woman looked exactly like me. My husband was at work, and I was on the couch downstairs typing up a lesson plan for my substitute. I can't go back to work. I can't do anything without feeling like that other woman was going to do something sinister now that she knows I know for sure now. Charlie came running down the stairs, a big smile on his face. I smiled back at him and he immediately froze, his joy sliding right off his expression, replacing it with confusion. He looked at me with these big, glossy green eyes before he squinted suspiciously.
How did you beat me?
What do you mean, baby?
I asked, tilting my head to the side.
We were playing upstairs. You told me I can get a juice. How did you beat me here?
I had to fight the bile that rose in my throat. It felt like gravity had just stopped working and everything was weighing down on my shoulders. I realized I was shaking.
Charlie, baby, come here. Sit with mommy,
I heard myself say. My voice was rough in my mouth, like sandpaper, and I didn't even feel Charlie as he bundled over. My body was numb. I typed this all out fast to ignore any spelling mistakes. I wanted to flee, to call 911, but my purse is upstairs and my keys are inside. My phone is charging too. I am begging you guys for help. I don't know what to do, and I can hear her now. She's calling for Charlie, asking him to come back upstairs. She sounds just like me. I'm so scared right now. I'm still shaking like a chihuahua. I hear her footsteps up there. He's definitely in the house. Please help us. I have been working for a delivery company for the last couple years. The money isn't bad, but it means long days and late nights. Last year, coming up to Christmas, there was a night that I will never forget. I had finished delivering the last parcel after a particularly long day. It was late and I was exhausted and thought I was going to fall asleep, so I pulled up to a gas station to get coffee. It seemed pretty quiet, and I was the only one there besides the shopkeeper, who was chewing tobacco on the bench outside. The second I stepped outside the car, the shopkeeper looked me up and down and said,
"You ain't from around here, are you?"
without breaking eye contact.
"No, I'm not. I live in the city. I was just delivering a package a few miles up, just getting a coffee before I head home." "Well, a bit late to be around these parts, ain't it?" "It's a busy time of year. Christmas is around the corner." "I guessed as much. Come on inside and let's get you that coffee."
He poured a liquid that seemed to resemble tar rather than coffee into a paper cup. I picked up a donut from a wicker basket and grabbed a $5 bill from my wallet. As I was doing so, I heard a loud bang coming from a door behind the counter.
"What the hell was that?" Oh, that's just my dog Jeremy. He gets all lonesome when he's locked up all by himself.
Well, that's a hell of a big dog you have there.
Yeah, it's a fine dog. Good at hunting. I don't suppose you go hunting often, being that you live in the city.
I've hunted pheasants once or twice with my Uncle Johnny. Never really liked it. Guess I just don't have the stomach for seeing dead animals.
Whereabouts do you live?
I told him the area, and as I did so, he just stared at me and nodded his head.
Yeah, I know the place you're talking about. I've been there once with my friend Carl. Was getting some supplies for the farm. When we went, I remember going down a road in the middle of the forest. Brought us right up beside the highway.
This was just what I needed, a shortcut.
Where is this road you're talking about?
Just drive on that road you was on for about 20 minutes, then you'll see a little dirt trail. Follow that little road and it'll take an hour off your journey.
Wow, thanks. I best be on my way now.
I began to wonder how I never saw it before. I handed the $5 note.
You better mind yourself. It's dangerous around these parts at night,
he said, while I poured the bitter coffee down my throat, wincing at the taste before walking towards the car. After about 20 minutes of driving, I saw the turnoff. It was almost invisible, unless you were looking for it. After about 2 miles of potholes and puddles, the engine began to sputter before cutting out. I got angry and smashed my hand into the horn in frustration. Then I went to check the engine, slamming the door behind me. Clouds of smoke came pouring out from the bonnet. I tried to open it, but when I touched it, I burned my hand. I was stressed. Now I had to wait for a tow truck to pick me up. I heard a growl, then a loud bang followed by footsteps running towards me. I was afraid it was a bear, so I ran into the car and squeezed in behind the driver's seat so it wouldn't see me. In the distance, about 20 feet in front of me, I heard the gravel crunch. Something was walking on all fours towards my car. The sound of the steps got louder and louder until it was right outside my passenger door. My curiosity got the better of me, so I slowly turned my head. It was a moose. I was relieved and let out a little laugh and sat up. The moose was looking at me, but then it suddenly jerked its head around as if it heard something in the forest. But before it even got a chance to move, it was dragged back into the dark cover of the forest. My heart jumped. What creature could even do that? Was a bear that strong and fast? Whatever it was, I wasn't too eager to meet it, so this time I crouched back down even further. My muscles were getting cramped. I could feel the ligaments on my thighs stretch. It was extremely painful, but I was afraid if I moved, the creature would have known I was there. My body practically cried out for me to move, but I didn't want to alarm whatever took the moose. I was in pain and was about to stretch, but then I heard a massive thud that caused the car to shudder. Something was on the roof. I could feel my heart pounding against my knee. I heard it moving around me before jumping off and running away. I let out a sigh of relief. It was gone. Bang! Something crashed into the windscreen, sending glass flying all over the place. I wiped a few shards from my face, looked up, and saw the moose head dripping with blood. Something must have ripped it clean off. Its antlers wedged into the window real good. There was a strong smell, and I could feel vomit seeping up my throat. I scrambled back to the other side of the car. Something was dashing around inside the forest. I saw a blur leaping towards me before the car wobbled aggressively. It rammed into the door again, then again. I thought it was going to break through. Then there was a light coming through the back window. I heard a gunshot, followed by an ungodly scream. I felt dizzy. My heart was racing faster than ever before. Then everything went black. I woke up in a hospital room with a blurry figure standing over me.
You feeling all right there, pal?
It was the shopkeeper.
My head is killing me. Where am I?
Hospital. You were driving home and you had a little accident. It was lucky I found you when I did.
There was nothing really wrong with me apart from a mild concussion, so they released me from the hospital the next day. Everything was fine after that. I assumed everything that happened was a bad dream and that there was no creature. But after about a week, I woke to something pounding against the front door at about 3 in the morning. I got a fright, so I grabbed a baseball bat from beside my bed and slowly made my way downstairs to see what was going on. I opened the front door and stepped outside to look around. I looked down and felt the familiar feeling of vomit creeping up my throat. The same pair of lifeless eyes staring up at me as that day in the forest. This time, the moose's antlers had broken off. The face was more decayed and had insects and larvae crawling out from the mouth and ears. Whatever I saw that day in the forest must have been real, and whatever was there followed me home. I don't know how, and I don't know why, but it has targeted me. I hear it outside at night stalking me and running around outside. I don't know when it's going to strike, but tomorrow I'm going to grab a taxi to the gas station and get the shopkeeper to tell me what the hell is really going on. This story is from a friend. He insisted I post it, and I agreed. I'm sorry.
I need you to post this everywhere, okay? Please. It'll make sense why. Promise.
My wife loves the ocean. We live by it, sort of. We live by a harbor that leads into the ocean, so we don't get to stare at nothing but water forever. My wife wanted a place by the ocean proper, but it freaked me out. Gave a lot of excuses that were plausible, you know?
What about the rising ocean levels because of climate change? We'll get flooded.
And
We'll lose the house if there's a really bad hurricane.
that kind of thing. I didn't tell her it's because I think the ocean is absolutely terrifying. Because she loves me, and she wants me to be happy. She wouldn't have moved out here if she knew. But I love her too, and I want to see her happy without putting me first. So I thought getting a place tucked into a harbor would be a good compromise. We moved out here, where the salt air peels the paint off our shingles and the fog sweeps in, morning and evening. I'm usually okay with the harbor. I treat it like one big lake. A big salty lake that has seals sometimes. My wife was so much happier than before, so for a while it was worth it. She likes to walk along the beach. I don't like walking along the beach, so my wife usually goes alone. We were planning to get a dog so she can go on walks with it. I usually make dinner, but she goes when I'm cooking and returns in time for when it's ready. Last night she missed dinner. She's been late a couple of times, but usually texts me. She knows I worry. She didn't text me, so I worried. After half an hour, I sucked it up and went looking for her. The fog was dense. I really got to stress that. You couldn't see 5 feet in front of you. It wasn't fully dark out yet, but the gray made the visibility even worse. I brought a flashlight and had my cell phone out and kept telling myself it was way too early to call the cops. I called for her a couple of times.
Felicity? Felicity? Adrian?
Hearing my own name in her voice made me want to burst, and I just started running towards the sound. I almost slipped on the rocks by the beach, but she caught me.
I was worried. I was so worried. Why didn't you text?
I admit, I should have been more composed, but I really wasn't thinking straight.
It ate my phone.
I honestly wasn't sure what I expected to hear, and it's not that I thought she was joking with me, but I was very confused.
What?
She pointed, and through the fog I could see the shape of something. Like I mentioned, we sometimes get seals, but not, say, walruses, which was my first thought, since it was not nearly big enough to be a beached whale. Then I realized that it wasn't a walrus either. Its skin was super pale, like those animals that live in caves, almost translucent. I could see thick, dark veins even through the fog, but that was about all I could parse. I literally had no idea what I was looking at, which is basically what I said.
The hell is that? I don't know,
she said. And that's when I noticed how calm she sounded, almost dreamlike. It was weird. She barely opened her mouth when she spoke.
But it ate my phone when I tried to take a picture of it. Then I got into an argument with it, but it's fine now.
For a second, I felt relieved that there was at least an explanation for why she didn't text, before the rest of it hit me square in the what the f of. Thinking she might have a concussion or something, I tried to stay calm.
What do you mean you got into an argument?
At that second, a sound came from the thing, and the creepiest thing about it was how soft and sweet the sound was. It was this big, strange animal that barely moved in the fog, and it had opened its toothless mouth so wide my whole head could have fit in there. But the sound that came out of it wasn't some deep bellow. It was like a little child saying, "Ah," for the dentist. My wife turned to the thing and said,
I know. I'm going to explain.
Can you explain over there?
I tried to pull her away, but she wouldn't go.
It doesn't want us to know it exists.
There was a sudden, squelching movement as something big and wet slapped the pavement, and the thing made a sound like a little squeak. I couldn't see it properly through the fog, but there was absolutely no way I was going to get any closer to it. I tried to whisper to her.
But isn't that ship already sailed? Humans. It doesn't want humans to know it exists. It comes to shore to eat. Whenever we saw it, we tried to tell others. It began to eat those things too. It ate our drawings on bark and carvings in stone. It ate our woodcuts and inked maps. It ate our radio signals. It ate our photographs. So it ate my phone, to eat it right at the source.
I decided to try and wrap my head around eating radio signals later, when we were safe.
So, we don't tell anyone. Problem solved? No, because we will remember. But if we die, it will make humans suspicious. Others will search for it, like you searched for me. And it is full. It is so full.
The thing made that humming noise, and I realized I recognized what it sounded like. It sounded like my wife doing baby talk.
Honey, how do you know what it wants? Because it ate my tongue,
She said, simply and calmly, and I could see in the dim, misty light her eyes wide with fear.
It replaced it with one of its children.
She opened her mouth wide, and for the first time I could see inside her mouth, and something slimy and pale was writhing in there.
You won't tell anyone, right? You won't tell anyone about it. This was the only way it would let me walk away. You'll protect me, Adrian, right? You'll protect me?
I took her home. We climbed into bed, and she put on a mask, I think to make me feel better. I struggled to fall asleep, obviously. I thought about it for a long time. At that beach, in that fog, I meant what I said when I promised the thing I wouldn't tell anyone about it. I thought we could figure this out. We could learn sign language, so she wouldn't have to use her mouth. But for those agonizing hours, when I knew she was also wide awake beside me, my wonderful, lovely Felicity, infected with a parasite on the whims of that bull sack from the deep, my fear and my shock transformed into a full-on, bone-deep rage until even that was exhausting. I did eventually pass out. When I woke up, it was noon. Our bed was damp, and there were water droplets all over the floor. My wife is not in the house. I don't know when she'll be back. I don't think I'm going to be able to do this. I think she's still alive, but I think she's being held hostage. As long as that thing is alive, my wife and I will be prisoners. Now, at this point, you may be wondering why I'm sending you this. Maybe it'll eat the internet too, but I don't think so. She said it was already full. I think the only reason I still have my tongue is because it was too full to eat it too. I'm calling its bluff. I know it's selfish to risk, but I am not going to let that thing get away with what it did to Felicity. I am terrified, but I am not going to let my fear rule me. After I send you this, I'm going to find my wife, rip that tongue out of her, and then kill that thing. But I need to keep it distracted, so post this for me, okay? Spread the word. Overwhelm it. Wish me luck. I opened my closet to a wormhole the other day. It was generic, like in the movies. Big 4-foot black hole in the middle, with galaxy-like purple spirals slowly turning around it. I just stood there, blinking. I rubbed my eyes, but it was all still there. I tried waving my hand in it to see if I was hallucinating, but my fingers disappeared as they went into the blackness.
I guess I'm not getting my jacket,
I thought. I finished getting ready for work and walked out into the winter air. I'm close to work, a 3-minute walk, so I didn't drive. I sat in my cubicle, thinking about it. It was so hard to focus on working. I ended up my 8-hour shift with a short stack of papers left that I didn't do because I was so distracted. Luckily, I was usually good with getting things done on time, and my boss was cool, so I'd be okay. I walked home to my apartment on the 2nd floor and immediately went to my bedroom. I needed to see if I was hallucinating still. I opened the door, and the eerily silent apparition was still there. That was one thing. It was dead silent, which made it less real. I just stared for a few seconds, then closed the door. I just played video games for a few hours and then went to bed. The next day I didn't have work. I was just going to chill all day. But this wormhole was eating away at me. The first thing I did after getting out of bed was open the door. This time, curiosity got the better of me, and I decided to step through. When I stepped through the blackness, I was facing my open closet door from the inside of the closet. It was like a mirror. I took a couple steps into my room, then turned around. The purple spirals were now red. I looked around and everything was good. Nothing different. Weird. I went to the computer and turned it on. That's when things went south. And fast. Everything on the computer with writing was flipped, like I was reading it through a mirror. I sat there bewildered for a second. Then I got up and went to the kitchen to look at the calendar, check the words on that too. Flipped.
No biggie,
I thought.
just go back through.
So I went back into the bedroom and stepped through, with the same mirrored thing happening. but this time the spirals were bright banana yellow.
Ugh, oh no.
I said to myself. The computer was still on, but this time, both text was mirrored and the wallpaper was flipped too. Now I started to panic. This time I ran through. Now the entire bedroom was mirrored on top of everything. I ran out of the room, not paying attention to the new color. My whole apartment was flipped. So, long story short, I kept running through, the color changing each time. Now, the flipping has gotten so bad I'm walking around on the ceiling. I managed to figure out my phone to make this post and call for help. If anyone has any idea of what to do, I would appreciate it. I'm afraid to go back through, and I would have to climb into the closet now. And I'm afraid to go outside because I'm worried that I'll fall into the sky. What should I do, guys?